They have also said that I'm scared of fighting Jon Jones. I don't know where they came from with that one. Sounds very ridiculous because I've been calling for this fight for over 2 years. I've been waiting for this fight forever. And now, why do I be scared of them? No, I'm not scared. I'm scared of is to be trapped. You guys know how the UFC contract can be restrictive. You don't really have a say in that contract. You don't even have a right in order to negotiate a better deal for me. I know I have to earn my position, and that's what I've been doing in the past 5 years.
Yeah, well, it's not like he's sitting around and doesn't want to fight. The guy came to fight. It's the first injury he's ever had. And listen to me, I'm not defending Jon Jones. You know what I mean? Jon Jones has been one of my biggest mistakes in the entire time that I've been in this company, right? And you know, the guy hasn't been the model, fighter in the company. No matter what you think of Jon Jones, he's the best ever, and he's the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world. And he's the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world.
Yeah. Well, except that he hasn't fought in the last year, so he's not.
Because he got hurt. He got injured.
But if you don't...
If you were coming into a fight and you fucking got hurt, that means you're not the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world anymore?
Francis Ngannou certified himself as one of the most scariest and fascinating heavyweights of all time in mixed martial arts after he had his 5th early knockout in a row against the greatest heavyweight in MMA, Stipe Miocic. Stipe versus Francis 2 was a very important fight for Francis because the first time they fought, Stipe showed him that in order to become a heavyweight champion in the UFC, you needed more skills besides relying on your knockout power. Stipe drowned Francis and had a dominant win in their first fight. It was so bad that Francis took the PTSD from that fight into his next fight against Derrick Lewis, having his 2nd loss in a row in one of the most boring fights in UFC history. Francis was reborn after that fight and went on a first-round knockout streak against Curtis Blaydes, Cain Velasquez, Junior Dos Santos, and Jairzinho Rozenstruik, before fighting Stipe again and flatlining him like a lawn chair in the 2nd round of their 2nd fight.
Undisputed UFC heavyweight champion of the world, Francis the Predator.
Once Francis became the undisputed heavyweight champion in the UFC, there was no doubt his MMA career had no limits. Jon Jones, who is regarded as the greatest of all time in most people's books, had already vacated the light heavyweight belt and for a year had been preparing for his transition into the heavyweight division. The night Francis brutally knocked Stipe out, this is what Dana White had to say.
Jones fight seems awfully exciting right now, and Jon came out, tweeted, said, "Show me the money." What appeals to you most? Because it seems like that would be an amazing super fight.
If I'm Jon Jones and I'm home watching this fight, I start moving to 85.
You think that's a fight that you'd like to put together next? I mean, I know we don't matchmake, but that sure does seem exciting.
Listen, I can sit here all day and tell you, what show me the money mean. I tell you guys this all the time. If you can say you want to fight somebody, but do you really want to?
Yeah.
It's because you would be afraid to fight Francis doesn't mean I would be afraid to fight Francis. You're probably not like me. Remember that.
If I'm Jon Jones and I'm home watching this fight, I start moving to 85.
You think that's a fight that you'd like to put together next? I mean, I know we don't matchmake, but that sure does seem exciting.
Listen, I can sit here all day and tell you, what show me the money mean. I tell you guys this all the time. If you can say you want to fight somebody, but do you really want to?
It's because you would be afraid to fight Francis doesn't mean I would be afraid to fight Francis. You're probably not like me. Remember that.
So Dana is pretty much implying that Jones stands no chance in the heavyweight division against Francis. He also implied that Jones was more of a talker and really not putting words to action because he was asking to be paid more. So objectively speaking, Jon Jones implied he wanted to be paid way more and have a better contract with more dollars. But Dana White and a lot of fans took this as him being scared. If I'm being honest, I could see it either way. On the other hand, Francis Ngannou spent the whole year calling Jon Jones out and begging for this fight to be made by any means.
In your mind, do you think Jon wants this fight, or is Jon going to ask for some crazy amount of money that's going to make it hard to happen?
No, I believe that Jon Jones won this fight. I believe that he'll want it to happen because it's going to be a massive fight, a mega fight. Basically one of the biggest. I mean, he's been around so long and he's been champ for a very long time, but I think this might be the biggest fight of his career, such in mind. So I think he won that thing. He want to put something else, something like this on his legacy, on his resume. So I truly believe that he wants this fight to happen.
But Jones went on a podcast with Steve-O and said something about the potential fight with Francis, which definitely could be seen as him being afraid to fight Francis Ngannou.
Francis Ngannou is scary. There's a big chance that he could break my jaw. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that as a fighter. I've whooped enough ass that if someone eventually gets me, then we all have our day. I'm okay with that. But I think that should come with an increase of pay.
This back and forth went on for a while, with Francis calling for the fight against Jones and Jones saying he wanted to be paid more, while Dana and the UFC always reminded fans that the fight was ready to be made, but the only person stopping that from happening was Jon Jones.
To you after 262, it almost seemed like you had moved on from Jon, and we've heard you in the past say Jon Jones, in your mind, the greatest UFC fighter of all time. Did I read that right? Are you moving on from Jon Jones? Has anything changed with Jon? Is there a fight on the horizon? What's up with Jon? And what can you tell the UFC fans who want to watch Jon Jones fight?
Yeah, I've absolutely moved on. Listen, I put on fights every Saturday. We have a window where we try to build some fights and make some things happen. If the fights don't happen within that window, we move on. And realistically, I mean, I've been saying it since the beginning. Derek Lewis is the guy who should be getting this title shot. This is the guy that's, beat Francis Ngannou. He's next in line. He's coming off great performances. And that's a wrap. We're moving on.
Dana, could Jon be done forever in the UFC? Is that a possibility?
That's up to Jon. Yeah, I mean, I was saying that night. I mean, he could absolutely fight again at 205. He said he wouldn't fight Stipe. So, and now Derek and Francis are fighting. So we'll see how that fight plays out.
Unfortunately, tensions will rise in the last quarter of 2021 between Francis and the UFC and Dana White. This was due to Francis raising a popular issue regarding fighter pay being too low, fighters not getting full insurance from the organization, and him just not being valued as a heavyweight champion in general. Francis always stated that he wanted to stay in the UFC and he regarded it as the best MMA organization, which is a fact. But all he wanted was some respect, which was fair because for such a specimen of a fighter that Francis is, he wasn't really being promoted the way you would expect. Francis was set to fight Ciryl Gane, who was being coached by his former coach Fernando Lopez. This fight had a lot of drama leading up to it. Francis and Dana White being in serious negotiation conflicts, Ciryl being coached in Francis' previous gym, and this being the last fight in Francis Ngannou's contract with the UFC. So there was a serious question to be answered on if this was the last time we would see Francis Ngannou fight in the UFC. Francis will win this fight by a unanimous decision, showing he had amazing wrestling skills in his arsenal and taking Ciryl to the ground throughout the fight. It later came out that Francis was fighting with both a torn ACL and MCL, which is why he resorted to wrestling. Regardless, Francis made his first title defense and stayed the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. Another odd thing that happened that night was Dana White, for whatever reason, was not available to wrap the belt around Francis' waist, which led to fans speculating that Dana wanted Francis to lose. But lo and behold, Francis won, and his stock and popularity as a heavyweight champion got higher. The tension between Francis and the UFC got worse through the year of 2022, Francis making his demands and Dana pretty much calling him delusional, and slowly Francis Ngannou started sounding like Jon Jones when he was asking to be paid what he was worth.
Started to dissolve.
He was before the Stipe fight, because I negotiated the contract before. My last contract was negotiated at that moment. And it took me almost 3 years to figure out what was the problem. But I think the problem was because during all this negotiation, I said something to Dana White, and this was by completely mistake. I didn't even know what I meant at that time, but I think like he felt attacked, he felt threatened by that when I said, doesn't matter, we can make a deal for this fight. We just focus on the Stipe fight, because I was making that deal like 6 weeks before the fight, and they were pushing me, and I didn't even have time to find a manager. Then I'm like, okay, I will do it on my own. And then sitting there with him, I'm like, let's just focus on this one. We can negotiate even after every fight. I think that was the thing that I said to Dana. And you shouldn't say something like that to somebody like Dana White.
Why do you?
But for some reason, Francis' case was received more negatively. I guess this was because he was the champion holding the belt and quote-unquote slowing the division down. But it can't be forgotten that Francis had 2 serious injuries before his fight with Ciryl Gane, and you could imagine it got way worse after that fight, requiring several surgeries. Francis' contract with the UFC expired in December 2022, and unfortunately, Francis and the UFC couldn't come to an agreement or any common ground. It was then announced in January 2023 that Francis was leaving the UFC.
This is for the official heavyweight title. You know, we've been working on a new agreement with Francis for like 2 years now. And we had gotten to a point where, you know, he was going to fight Jon Jones. And many who believe, including me, that he's the best of all time. You know, for the heavyweight championship. And Jon Jones has been willing and ready and able to fight anybody. He didn't care who it was. Could have been anybody in the heavyweight division. He was ready to go. And Francis, we offered Francis a deal that would have made him the highest paid heavyweight in the history of the company. More than Lesnar, more than anybody. And he turned the deal down. So, you know, I don't know, you know, we get to this point where I've told you guys this before. If you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. You know, I think Francis is in a place right now where he doesn't want to take a lot of risk. Feels like he's in a good position where he could fight lesser opponents and make more money. So we're gonna let him do that. We're gonna release him from his contract. We're gonna give up our right to match. And he can go wherever he wants and do whatever he wants. Yeah, that's where we're at.
Ngannou has said that he left the UFC because he asked for too many things during the negotiations, including health insurance for all fighters, but the UFC offer didn't give him enough freedom. He also claims that he turned down an offer that would have made him the highest paid heavyweight fighter in history. The same night that it was announced that Francis will be leaving the UFC, it was also announced that Jon Jones will be making his heavyweight debut against Ciryl Gane for the undisputed heavyweight championship belts. So to be clear, Jones had been asking to get paid massively to fight Francis Ngannou for the heavyweight belt for almost a year, while Francis and Dana White were pretty much begging for the fight. Jones made his case on why the fight was so risky, he deserved to be paid massively. But then Francis asks to be paid as well, and also some freedom adding to that demand to do things like boxing on the side. This caused the UFC not to come to terms. But when Francis leaves the UFC, Jones all of a sudden signs a contract to fight Ciryl Gane, and mind you, this wasn't for the same amount that he was asking for the whole time. Regardless, Jon Jones would have a fantastic but anticlimactic win against Ciryl Gane.
He's putting pressure.
Certifying himself without a doubt as the greatest mixed martial artist ever. Jones would then start throwing shots at Francis Ngannou, telling him he was scared to fight him, which is why he ran away.
More in the front right here. I don't know if you saw, but Francis tweeted, good job, Johnny Boy, sincerely, the heavyweight king. Do you have a response to Francis Ngannou referring to himself?
Francis is a big old pussy.
Hey, John.
Fans were upset Francis didn't accept whatever the UFC offered him to stay, and a narrative was painted that Francis, quote unquote, fumbled the bag. This frustration, I guess, would lead people to go with the narrative, and somehow Francis was afraid to fight Jon Jones. Meanwhile, in the previous year, it was the exact opposite. After Jones easily beat Ciryl, his next goal was to fight good old Stipe Miocic. While Francis was able to get a great MMA contract with the PFL, which would allow him to have whatever boxing matches he wanted. Fast forward to 2024, Francis Ngannou has managed to fight two of the biggest names in boxing, technically winning a fight against Tyson Fury, but being robbed because boxing is boxing. He then had a fight against Anthony Joshua where he would get brutally knocked out. On the other hand, Jones has still not fought Stipe Miocic. Stipe has not fought since he got flatlined by Francis Ngannou, and there is no active fighter on Stipe's resume right now in the heavyweight division. Jon Jones suffered a pectoral tear, which led to the fight against Stipe Miocic being cancelled. Then Tom Aspinall and Sergey Pavlovich fought for the interim belt, and Tom Aspinall had a massive and impressive performance and became the interim heavyweight champion. At the same time, Jones is currently ducking the interim champ Tom Aspinall.
Wait, do one. Just saying hello. Just saying hello. All the best. Do a quick picture. Sure. Yeah. Let's get it. A face off.
Jon Jones for a while has been gaslighting the fans and making a ridiculous case on why Stipe is the fight to have. Meanwhile, not one single fan is calling for this fight. In fact, Jones has even gaslit the fans to make a case against fighting Alex Pereira as well. Of course, everyone sees through Jones' fakeness, wanting to fight Stipe because he's old and Pereira because he doesn't have a wrestling base, but staying far away from Tom Aspinall, who is young and probably the most well-rounded heavyweight that is currently on the roster. Dana White has also gone on being a promoter, of course, making a case for why Jones vs Stipe is the fight to make. And Dana also has contradicted himself, trying to switch the narrative to say Francis was scared of Jon Jones.
Do you believe Jon Jones was afraid of Francis?
Right? Sits out for 3 years, comes back, and beats Ciryl Gane. Like that, easily. In my opinion, he does the same thing to Francis.
What?
100%. Does the same thing to Francis. Jon Jones, Francis didn't want to fight Jon Jones. Jon Jones is the scariest, most badass fighter of all time.
Let's really be objective here. If we had to ask the question, who ducked who between Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou, there is no question in my opinion that Jones takes the duck crown in this fight. Not only did he duck Francis Ngannou and change the narrative, he is currently known for being a duck and tarnishing his legacy by not wanting to fight Tom Aspinall while making all the excuses in the world, even to the extent of going back and forth with fans on social media. Mind you, there is absolutely nothing stopping Jones and Francis from happening. Both the UFC and PFL have a streaming deal with ESPN. The UFC is the powerhouse of MMA, and even though there is no incentive to make the fight, it also wouldn't hurt them in any way. In fact, a lot of money is there to be made. But best believe if we never saw Jones versus Francis when they were both signed in the UFC, unfortunately, we may never see this fight happen. I made this video because a lot of people have chosen to have amnesia and forget the timeline of events that actually happened. Francis literally begging to fight Jon Jones while he was champion, and Jon Jones over a year demanding to get paid and whatnot. But the moment Francis started asking to get paid, it was like the past never happened.
The UFC really want the fight to happen. They've told me that. This is, as I said, this is one of the biggest fights that can be made in MMA right now. And everybody knows that. Everybody knows it. It's just, does he want to put himself in a position where he's comfortable enough financially to take the risk that he's taking to fight me? And that is where we're at. Like, the UFC tell me, they assure me that they are doing everything they can to make this fight. So it's totally, as far as I'm aware, this is now totally down to Jon Jones and his team to work that out, because I'm in, the UFC are in. They assure me that they desperately want to make the fight. Every time I speak to them, they say we are working as hard as we can.
Jon Jones would like 6 months to prepare to fight Tom Aspinall.
I'm gonna go through every single time Jon Jones avoided true competition by giving one silly excuse or the other on why he shouldn't take a fight when he knew he had a high chance of losing that fight. Now, this is a pattern that I called earlier, and I noticed when it was time for Jon Jones to face Francis Ngannou. He had an interview with Steve-O, and that was the first time I heard Jon Jones actually talk about being paid what he's deserved.
Do you want to fight soon? No, I don't want to fight soon. I don't want to fight soon. I have no interest in fighting in the UFC until I get paid what I believe I'm worth. It's really powerful when you stand up for what you believe is right, and I think that eventually the UFC will realize that they're being stubborn. And if I have to have a bad relationship with Dana, sit out for 2 years, 3 years to bring light.
Your last 2 fights has gotten people saying, like, Jon Jones looks human in his last 2 fights. He seems somehow beatable in his last 2 fights. I'm not necessarily saying I believe that's the case, but there's theories out there.
What is that? Why are you looking like that?
I mean,
because it's shitty. We all have bad days at work. Francis Ngannou is scary. You know, there's a big chance that he could break my jaw, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. As a fighter, I've whooped enough ass that if someone eventually gets me, then we all have our day. I'm okay with that. But I think that shit comes with an increase of pay.
The funny thing about that clip we just watched is that I agree with every single thing Jon Jones said. Everything. He deserves to be paid what he's worth. I consider him the GOAT of MMA, and if he doesn't deserve to be paid what he's asking for, then nobody deserves to be paid anything, honestly speaking. And guess what? Even Francis Ngannou agreed with Jon Jones that he deserves to be paid. They both deserve to be paid, and this was the beginning of the whole fighter pay issue, you know, with two of one of the best fighters in the UFC at the time talking about fighter pay. But guess what? It turns out Jon Jones didn't mean anything he said in that interview. And do you know how I know that? Because he took a contract to fight Ciryl Gane once Francis Ngannou left the UFC. I mean, within a span of weeks, Francis Ngannou left the UFC, and then Jon Jones took a contract to fight Ciryl Gane for the vacant heavyweight championship. I mean, it doesn't get more obvious than that. Towards the end of the video, I will let you know how I know for sure Jon Jones wasn't paid what he was asking for. Fast forward to 2024, Jon Jones runs into Tom Aspinall in person and tells him maybe one day the fight will happen, even though he knows damn well he never intended on fighting Tom Aspinall.
Hello, just saying hello. What's going on, man? How are you? I'm all good, man. Gonna do this thing.
I would hope so.
I would love to, man.
I would hope so.
Respect, man.
All the best.
Respect.
All the best.
We'll do a quick picture.
Sure.
Yeah?
Let's get it.
A face off.
No,
Just no, okay. No problem. No problem. No problem.
That's great. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Nice to meet you, Tom.
I would love to have the honor one day. I would love to have the honor.
Maybe one day.
Hope so, man. All the best. All the best. How's everything?
It's healing. So slowly but surely.
After a while, when Tom Aspinall becomes the interim heavyweight champion, everybody's asking Jon Jones why he just wouldn't face Aspinall. Why would he rather stick to his call out of Stipe Miocic when that matchup did not make any sense? And then Jon Jones' first excuse is that Tom Aspinall hadn't done anything to deserve a fight with him, even though Aspinall had already beat the top of the heavyweight division. Him saying he hasn't achieved anything, meanwhile he doesn't want to give him the opportunity to achieve anything, just didn't make sense.
I feel like Tom Aspinall is, I don't want to say nobody, but he just hasn't proven anything. He hasn't done anything.
And of course, Jon Jones' second excuse was that he doesn't have to accept a fight with someone young that poses a threat. He didn't want to give Tom a chance to make a name off him. In other words, he's ducking.
I'm not here to gamble someone else making a name off of me. I'm here to compete against the guys where when we look back, 10 years from now, it'd be like Jon Jones fought this guy and that guy and this legend and this champion and this champion. If there were to be a fight of a guy that's still on our UFC roster that would be not only financially worth it, but legacy worth it, it would be Alex Pereira.
But guess what? It gets worse. Jones' third excuse was then trying to gaslight fans, just like he hinted in that interview, claiming a fight versus Alex Pereira was bigger and more important than a fight against Tom Aspinall, knowing damn well and knowing everybody knows there's a clear difference when it comes to the stylistic matchup when you compare both fighters, especially considering the fact that Tom Aspinall is literally the interim heavyweight champion. Somehow it got worse. Jon Jones' fourth excuse is that he's done it all and he would rather vacate his belt than face Tom Aspinall. In fact, he would rather face people like Jamal Hill or Derek Lewis, just to have fun and take pressure off him. So that's him admitting that he's ducking again and lying about vacating the belt, because till now he hasn't vacated any belts.
I just see myself after this entertaining super fights only. After this fight, if we get a dominant performance, I'm prepared to vacate the heavyweight championship and fight for fun. I want to fight for fun. I've had a big chip on my shoulder my whole career of having to defend, and I don't necessarily want it to be over, but I just want to fight for fun. Fighting guys that I stylistically want to fight against. Just random fights, Jamal Hill, me and him meet up at 220 and see what happens. That'd be interesting to see. Let's just see what happens, or I'm at an interesting weight where I can fight light heavyweights or heavyweights. Derek Lewis, the biggest knockout puncher in history. I'm just throwing out random names.
I mean, let's just see what happens. Let's just see what happens. And we all know what's gonna happen with those silly matchups. I mean, I don't even need to ask. By the way, guys, if you're in this part of the video, I really appreciate if you hit that like button. It really helps me a lot. But just listen to the fifth excuse Jon Jones gave on why he doesn't want to fight Tom Aspinall.
He's annoying to me. And that's my own personal. He annoys me. I get to you guys, you find it entertaining. But I find him annoying, and I just don't like him.
And at the end of the day, if I give him the opportunity to fight me, I want to be so compensated. I want to say it, I want that fuck you money, honestly. And that's just what it is. That's just what it is. Or else my life is perfect without him. I don't need him at all. And he needs me. And that's a good place to be in a negotiation.
It's just so funny that Jon Jones is talking about he won't fight Tom Aspinall because he finds Tom Aspinall annoying. First of all, Tom Aspinall is probably the nicest heavyweight one would run into. And Jon Jones has one of the worst personal lives ever. Talk about annoying. He's literally being annoying in this whole situation. Oh, and by the way, did I say that was his 5th excuse? Because he had 2 excuses in that statement. First, he says he doesn't want to do business with Tom Aspinall because he's annoying. And then the next excuse is, okay, he wants to be paid FU money. There he goes again, talking about fighter pay the same way he talked about it when he came to Francis Ngannou. But when he came to fighting Stipe Miocic, you didn't hear Jon Jones demand any type of monetary value. And of course, I can't forget to say Dana White, rightfully so, made a stance and confirmed that once Jon Jones fought Stipe Miocic, and if he won that fight, if he wants to fight for the heavyweight belt again, it has to be Tom Aspinall, or he can just vacate the belt.
Do you still want to see the winner of this fight Tom Aspinall to unify the heavyweight title?
Was that for me?
Yeah.
What's the question?
Do you want to see the winner fight Tom?
The winner should absolutely fight Tom. Who's got the next question?
Knock it off.
That one definitely got to Jon Jones. By the way, this proves that Jon Jones was definitely not paid close to what he asked for in order to fight Francis Ngannou when he was offered a fight against Ciryl Gane. Because it wouldn't make sense to sing the same tune only for Aspinall and not for Stipe Miocic, right? It's not a coincidence that the only time Jon Jones has talked about fighter pay and being paid what he's worth, or FU money, or however he wants to put it, it's only been against Tom Aspinall and Francis Ngannou. 2 guys that everybody knows, including Jon Jones, pose a great threat to him at the heavyweight division. So now, it seems like the UFC has called Jon Jones bluff. They probably offered him some type of FU money to fight Tom Aspinall. Because all of a sudden, it comes out that Jon Jones has requested 6 months to prepare for Tom Aspinall.
Jon Jones wants 6 months. He wants 6 months to prepare for Aspinall.
By the way, not 6 months in general. 6 months from when the so-called contract will be signed, which will be over a year since the last time he fought, which was against Stipe Miocic. Jon Jones has delayed this fight as long as he can, and at the same time, it will be over a year since the last time Tom Aspinall has fought. This is Jon Jones' 7th excuse, in my opinion, when it comes to fighting Tom Aspinall. Add that to his excuses when he came to facing Francis Ngannou. That's a total of 8 separate times that Jon Jones gave a reason why he wouldn't fight, or why he will fight at a certain time, however you want to put it. I really think Aspinall should start a campaign for Jon Jones to be stripped rather than asking for the fight. If not, he's just going to turn to Michael Chandler. You know, the same way Chandler kept chasing McGregor, knowing damn well that fight was probably not going to happen after a while, and McGregor always knew that fight wasn't going to happen. Now, Dana White has said apparently the fight is happening, but I'm not going to hold my breath for that. I'm not going to believe anything until I see both guys in the octagon. I cannot wait to see what Jon Jones' next excuse is going to be. I just don't think that fight is happening. And I think Jon Jones should be stripped of the heavyweight championship.
And that man's looking for a fight. What does that mean?
I see quite a few people in here calling me a duck. I'm a duck. Call me a duck. Call me a chicken. Call me a goat. Call me a dog. I'm not in high school anymore, guys. A grown man out here chasing his dreams. It's funny that we really live in a world where being called a duck should affect me. Guys, come on.
So Ariel confirms that they're trying to set this fight. I mean, I think it's been obvious, guys. I've said this over and over again. I have a whole video detailing this. The UFC wants to fight. In fact, Aspinall said it as well. The UFC wants to fight, of course. Tom Aspinall wants to fight, of course. The only reason this fight is not set is Jon Jones. I put out a video last year talking about how Jon Jones avoids real competition. I called this early. I called it early. I knew he was never gonna fight Tom Aspinall. I had a bunch of Jon Jones fanboys in my comments talking about, man, he's the GOAT, man. He's the GOAT, man. What are you talking about? First of all, I'm not talking about his light heavyweight freaking career. I can't argue about that. In my opinion, he's the GOAT. You know, if we're excluding his cheating and PEDs and all that shit, fine, he's the GOAT. Legendary lightweight run, but we all know he left when things started being difficult. Fine, but as a heavyweight, he's an absolute disgrace. Boom, and that's just facts, okay? I also talked about how the fact that Jon Jones is asking for 6 months means that the UFC actually offered him the FU money, which he said he wanted, which was his final excuse. First, he said Tom Aspinall hasn't done anything to deserve it. Ridiculous. Everybody called him out on it. Second, he said he would rather vacate the belt and have fun fights, fight people like Alex Pereira or freaking Derek Lewis.
Huh?
Derek Lewis.
And I want to fight for fun. Fighting guys that I stylistically want to fight against. You know, just random fights, you know, like Jamal Hill. Huh? Me and him meet up at 220 and see what happens. That'd be interesting to see. Let's just see what happens. Derek Lewis, you know, the biggest knockout puncher in history. I'm just throwing out random names.
What the fuck is that?
That's when I was like, yeah, this guy's a real duck. Gave a whole bunch of excuses, and then the next one he said, oh, Tom Aspinall is just mean. He's not a nice guy. From Jon Jones?
Huh?
Jon Jones saying someone else is not a nice guy, that's why he doesn't want to fight him. Yet he created a fake beef with Stipe Miocic, leading to their fight. It's like just a lot of contradictions. But let's see what Ariel Helwani said. Very, very interesting thing he said here. But he confirms, I knew this. This is not even surprising. I don't know why it's surprising to anyone. But I called this. But Ariel confirms what I've been saying.
That are pertinent right now to MMA fans. Number one, Chael Sonnen yesterday, who I would say, like, if he was a slugger for the Yankees, what do you think he bats in terms of news? I adore Chael. He's one of my closest friends.
0.05.
Is he? My understanding is, am I wrong? Did you guys see the same thing?
Yeah.
My understanding is not quite accurate. Now, here's the thing. Here's what I understand. My understanding is, if this fight doesn't come to fruition, if for whatever reason it falls apart and we never get to see Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall, the UFC is not to blame. The UFC has, in my opinion, well, excuse me, I'll take that back. The UFC has, based on the conversations that I've had, not in my opinion, but what I'm reading and surmising and what's being told to me is they have made every effort in very good faith to make this fight happen. Now, obviously, when fights don't come to fruition, there's a multitude of reasons as to why fights don't happen. But in my opinion, if this fight doesn't happen, it's not because of the UFC. It's not because of Tom Aspinall as well. I think ultimately who will decide whether or not this fight happens or not is Jon Jones. Now, that's not some big breaking news, but I say that to say, yes, if Jon wants the fight to happen today, and I don't mean like the fight to actually be fought today, but like done deal today. It could be a done deal today. It's up to him, and it's always been up to him. Now, for a while, you could have said, all right, they have to meet whatever number, right? That 30 million was thrown out. Whatever that number is, Rogan walked it back. I had heard the same number, whatever. Point is, I believe that the UFC has met all the demands.
Well,
in a very favorable way for both guys. They both have demands. We know what Tom wants to a degree, and we know what John wants to a degree. I think ultimately it's on him. Now, we don't need to get into the whole like, at what point do they need to pull the plug on this, and when's the deadline? We've done that song and dance a bunch of times, and I'm kind of tired of it. Like they'll do it when they need to do it. They'll do it when they want to do it. They'll do it when they need Tom to fight. If John isn't going to be that guy. But I think at this point, there are some people who want to say, hey, the UFC didn't make Jones versus Ngannou. The UFC didn't make this big fight. The UFC didn't make that big fight. When the story is written on this fight, if it doesn't come to fruition, I don't think it will be on the UFC. I really think...
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Look, a lot of people, right, try to rewrite history with the whole Francis Ngannou, John Jones thing. People were so pissed that Francis Ngannou didn't just shut up and fight for whatever bullshit pay he was getting. Stop complaining. Stop asking for more money. Just fight. Shut up and fight. Fight John Jones. And it's so ridiculous because John Jones was the first person to start asking for money. It wasn't Francis Ngannou. John Jones was the first one to ask for money. What he said there, you know, Francis Ngannou is such a dangerous guy, you know. But I'm okay with him getting knocked out. I'm okay with getting knocked out. I'm okay with losing to Francis Ngannou. I just think that it should come with some type of pay that is worth getting knocked out. He has that stance with Francis, right? Francis also wanted to be paid what he's worth. And also to go box and whatever. The difference is if they paid Francis what he wanted, he would. In fact, Francis always called for this fight. John Jones only calls to be paid what he's quote unquote worth, depending on the opponent. Because the same night that Francis Ngannou left the UFC due to them not being able to come to terms, it's the same freaking the next night Jones versus Cyril Gane was announced.
Boom! Headshot!
Huh? Like what? So what happened to be getting paid what you're worth? Oh, so when it comes to fighting Francis, you know, you got to be paid a lot. You got to be paid what you're worth. But when it comes to fighting Cyril Gane, whatever. Let's stick to whatever contracts we have. When it comes to fighting Tom Aspinall, you want that FU money. But when it comes to fighting Stipe, yeah, whatever. You know, he wouldn't have asked to be paid what he's worth if they said, okay, Jones, let's see you fight Alex Pereira. He wouldn't have been asking for FU money if they were like, let's see you fight freaking Derek Lewis, which John Jones hinted out. John Jones said, oh yeah, you know, I want to fight fun fights with Derek Lewis or Jamal Hill.
Huh?
John Jones.
Oh, bro.
He has a serious problem, bro.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
He has a serious problem, but it's not that complicated. He avoids true competition. I said this over and over again. The guy, he's so narcissistic that he doesn't want to have the risk of having an official loss on his record. But I understand it. First of all, don't get me wrong. I don't think John Jones has to fight Tom Aspinall. I don't think so. I agree that he's cemented his legacy. There's nothing else to prove. First of all, coming back, even if it was just against Cyril Gane, coming back after so long to become the heavyweight champion against Gane is still some legendary shit. It was after that fight I was like, okay, this guy is the GOAT in my book. But the annoying thing is the fact that he's holding on to this belt. He said that if after he fights Stipe, he's willing to vacate the belt and have fun fights. But then now he hasn't vacated the belts. He hasn't. He's still holding on to it. We've not heard any retirement. But then he changes his tone and asks for FU money. And now they've offered him FU money. And he's talking about 6 months. Just excuse after excuse. All this just means he doesn't want to fight. But the UFC is trying their best to make it. Jon Jones fans are still being gaslighted. Or gaslit, whatever the correct term is. Freaking media is encouraging this shit, paying attention to whatever he says, when it's so obvious this guy is just a walking freaking contradiction.
The UFC, based on what I'm hearing and have been told, I really think the UFC has done everything that they could to make it happen. Is the fight a done deal as of right now? No, it's not a done deal as of right now. So I don't know what he's hearing. Could it be a done deal as of today? At some point? Could it be a done deal in 30 minutes? Yes. But is it a done deal as of earlier today when I was doing some digging? No. So I don't know if we add that to the 0.05 or the 0.5 that Pizzi said, but I wouldn't celebrate just yet. If you're hoping, if you're praying, if you want to see this fight like everyone does, I think it's a little premature. He may be right in that there's a date earmarked, there's a time frame, there's a want, there's a desire, there's a need to make this happen. He is right about all of that. But to say it's a done deal, to me, is a little bit premature. In fact, so much so that I had heard at one time there was some talk about having the fight in August in New York City at Madison Square Garden. Now, you know that annually they like to go to Madison Square Garden in November. We talked yesterday about how the Madison Square Garden date and venue has really become like the new international fight week, if you will, where they try to bring the biggest and best fights possible, in addition to Miami to a degree. And that's how much they wanted to get this done and put it in the biggest and best venue possible, which of course is Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena, the Mecca. August is rapidly approaching. Not hearing that's the case as of this moment. So the reason I bring this up is after hearing what Chael said, I wanted to see if there was any validity to it. He is right in that there's dates being discussed, there's this and that. It is not accurate that it's 100%. And it would not be fair to the UFC to say that they dropped the ball on this one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely makes sense, Ariel. Absolutely makes sense. First of all, Chael Sonnen is the least reliable source in anything. The man literally said Jones versus Aspinall is set, and then the next day talked about Cyril Gane versus Tom Aspinall. Speaking of Cyril Gane versus Tom Aspinall, which is freaking crazy. If they set that fight and it's not for the heavyweight championship belt, bro, I don't even know what to say.